So we are now protecting that profile page and we redirect away if we're not authenticated. If I do log in, on the other hand, if I use valid credentials, I can go to profile and I see that page. And I can also directly enter profile and I see that page. But that brief moment of loading, which flashes on the screen when we enter profile when not authenticated, that is maybe something we want to get rid of. Now, we can't really get rid of it with just client-side code. Because if we visit this page and we then use client-side JavaScript code to determine whether we are authenticated or not, then we'll always need to wait that fraction of a second to find out if we are. But we must not forget that Next.js blends server-side and client-side code. So we can use server-side code to determine whether the user who sent the request is authenticated or not, and return different page content and possibly a redirect if the user is not authenticated. For this, we need to go to the profile page and then add an extra function. The question now just is which function. We could, of course, add the getStaticProps function here. This would allow us to fetch data for this page in advance. But that's the wrong function. Why? Because you must not forget that getStaticProps runs during build time. Yes, it can also run thereafter with revalidate set to a certain duration, but it mainly runs during build time. It does absolutely not run for every incoming request. Now here in this case, every incoming request matters though, because we need to find out if that user is logged in or not. And that's why instead we should use get server-side props. That will then get a context object where we get access to the incoming request. And the good thing about getSession, which I'm using in the profile, the user profile component here, getSession, the good thing about this function is that you're not limited to using it on client-side code only. You can, as you see, it works in a component, but you can also use getSession on the server side, even though it's imported from NextAuth client. So we can copy that import and bring that over to profile.js here and import that on this page, in this page file. And then here in get server-side props, we can also call getSession and actually pass in an object where we set a request key, a rec key, to the incoming request, which we get out of the context we're receiving here, context.rec. Don't forget that you have access to the request object through that context when using get server-side props. And we pass this request, which we get here, into this getSession function through that rec key in that configuration object. And then getSession will automatically look into that request and extract the data it needs, the session token cookie to be precise, and see if that's valid and if the user is authenticated and if that cookie even exists to begin with. So that will all happen behind the scenes. We just need to call getSession here, and we can convert this into an async function and await this, since this will return a promise. And as a result, we'll get our session. And this will be null if the user is not authenticated, and it will be a valid session object if the user is authenticated. So now with that in place, we can act accordingly. We can check if not session, so if it's null, if we don't have a session, if the visiting user is not authenticated, and in that case, we return an object here inside of get server-side props, where we maybe set redirect to an object to redirect the user. That is something you learned about in an earlier course section. This object, which you return in get server-side props and in get static props, typically is an object where you set props for the component. But as you learned, you're not limited to that. You can also set the not found key to true to show the 404 page, or you set the redirect to an object where you describe the redirect you want to issue. And that will then redirect the user to a different page without even flashing that user profile page. This redirect object then wants a destination key where you specify the path you want to redirect to, for example, to the auth page. And you can add permanent to indicate if that's a permanent redirect, which will always apply, or only a temporary one. And here we definitely want to set permanent to false to make it clear that it's only this time that we redirect, because the user is not logged in. Now, if we don't make it into this if block, we know that there is a session, the user is logged in, and hence we want to return an object where we don't set not found to anything and where we don't redirect, but where we instead just set our props. And if we want, we can then pass the session as a prop to the page, like this. So now we use get server-side props for that. And that means that in the user profile component, we can now get rid of our client-side code. We can comment this out or delete this, because this component, this user profile component here, let me remove the imports, this component, which is used by the profile page, will only be rendered if that page renders. And that page will only render if we are authenticated because of our get server-side props logic. And that might be the more elegant way of handling this, because with this, if we save that, if I'm not logged in and I then visit /profile, I don't even see the profile page flashing. Instead, I'm instantly redirected. Now, if I do log in though, if I do enter valid credentials, then I can go to the profile page and I can also enter it like this and it loads. And that is maybe the more elegant way of handling this, which is why I also wanted to show it to you. Now, with that, however, let's make sure that we also implement something similar for the auth page. Here, after logging in successfully, I also want to redirect away to the profile page, let's say, and I want to make sure that we can't load the auth page if I am logged in already. So let's see if we can find a solution for this as well. Just a side note, because I see it, this warning which is showing up here, we can ignore it for now. We will set this environment variable later.